Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we will be talking about the crisis unfolding in Russia. Now, many of you probably saw my live stream last night where we kind of live tracked the beginning stages of this entire thing, and I mean, if you were there, you already know just how serious of a situation that this is, but I know many of you woke up to this information today. It started developing a little bit later in the night yesterday, right around like 6-7 p.m. Eastern time, and then we followed it until, I think it was like 10:30, 11 o'clock here on the East Coast when we tuned out. But ever since that moment, there have been several new updates in this entire situation that are just absolutely bonkers, right? And for those of you that did not see the stream last night, what we are taking a look at today is perhaps the most important development in the entire Russia situation since their invasion of Ukraine early last year, right? Now, when we started covering the entire Ukraine war situation, that in and of itself was already like important. That was big deal. That was, huge news then, but this is actually insane. This is something that in my lifetime I've never even come close to seeing. So right now there is a military coup unfolding inside of Russia and potentially in Belarus. We'll get into that here in a little bit as well, but obviously we will be keeping most of this situation to just Russia. So for those of you who are unaware as to what exactly is happening, a special private military contractor force inside of Russia called the Wagner Group, you may know them as the Wagner Group. That's how most people in America pronounce it, but basically this Wagner Group, which is an elite quote-unquote force of about 50,000 Russian troops, now about 25,000 troops after the conflict in Ukraine and everything, are essentially staging a military coup inside of Russia right now in order to destabilize the Putin regime and take Putin out of power, and also the people that he has basically put into power through the Ministry of Defense and his top generals and whatnot. This is essentially a fight to quote-unquote bring justice to Russia, claims Wagner. Now, this beef between the Russian government and the Wagner Group has actually been brewing for months, and a lot of it actually comes back to the whole situation in Ukraine. Now, like I said, Wagner has been fighting for Russia in Ukraine for the last several months and whatnot, and they had some pretty major gripes with the Russian government about ammunition on the front lines and supply chains, decision-making in the conflict. So there was already a little bit of tension between the Russian authorities and Wagner over the last few months. But these tensions came to a boiling point yesterday when the head of Wagner, a man by the name we'll be calling Prigozhin, as he's commonly referred to in news articles and whatnot, basically made the bold claim that the Russian military was behind strikes that had killed dozens of Wagner soldiers, essentially accusing the Russian government of deliberately targeting their own men. Keep in mind, Wagner are Russians. They were fighting on behalf of the Russian government. So to put that in like American terms, because I know most of us watching this video are Americans, imagine if like the Blackwater Company accused the US government of drone striking them in the Middle East and killing dozens of their troops. So they obviously were pretty irate at the Russian government. And this is when Prigozhin declared war against the Russian government and Putin. And from there, they began pulling all of their Wagner troops that were in Ukraine and turning them back towards the Russian border and sending them back into Russia to march to Moscow. Now, first, they targeted a city called Rostov-on-Don. Now, this is a city of over 1 million people inside of Russia. It is dozens of miles from the Ukrainian border. And if you were tuned into my stream yesterday, we watched live as they marched down the M4 highway through barricades and blockades with little to no resistance from the actual Russian military, and took the administrative and Ministry of Defense buildings and whatnot inside of Rostov over. As of right now, the city of Rostov is essentially under Wagner control. Now, that's not the only place that they've stopped. There was engagements along the M4 highway, which runs from Rostov along western Russia up into Moscow. Now, this is the main highway where Wagner was basically expected to be making their march to Moscow. Now, keep in mind, this is about 25,000 elite soldiers. It's pretty well understood that they are pretty well, equipped. Their capabilities are pretty decent. This isn't just some, ragtag fighting force. These guys are legitimate mercenaries for hire, and they are now making a march towards Moscow. And overnight, it developed to the point where, as of right now, Wagner forces are just hundreds of kilometers away from Moscow, mere hours away. Video has been surfacing on social media showing them continue to move through checkpoints and blockades. There has been little resistance, really, from the Russian military. They haven't really engaged any of the Wagner troops. Now, we do know last night that there were minor clashes along the M4 highway between some forces. We've had reports that, you know, the Russian military even has struck this convoy of Wagner forces several times now. But at the same time, we also know that last night Wagner claimed to have downed 2 Russian helicopters, and even reports today are suggesting they may have taken out a warplane belonging to Russia along with more vehicles. So as it stands right now, Wagner is inflicting losses on the Russian military, which now sees itself kind of, you know, tethered between fighting in Ukraine and now defending their country from an interior military coup against 25,000 highly trained soldiers. So as it stands right now, reports have suggested that Putin and all of his top brass, all of his top officials inside of Moscow have now fled the city, most likely to St. Petersburg to the north. Putin's planes were spotted on Flight Radar 24, essentially his equivalents to Air Force One. They departed from Moscow's international airport and then basically disappeared off the radar after heading north. So essentially Putin and his allies in power are now fleeing the capital of Moscow as Wagner troops are making impressive speed, to say the least, as they break straight towards Moscow. And one of the most shocking things in this entire situation really is just how little resistance the Russian military has actually been giving. Now, right now, we don't know if that's due to any military orders to not engage from higher ups. I doubt that to be true. Most of the higher ups in the military have been very loyal to Putin, so I don't see why they would, you know, not want to defend themselves, because it's not like, you know, Wagner isn't coming for them. Wagner's coming for Putin and all of his boys. They are trying to instill legitimate regime change inside of Russia. So looks like Putin and all of his guys have fled north out of Moscow, and who really knows? I mean, from what we've heard, the Russian military has been making strikes against the Wagners as they advance towards Moscow, leading them to basically defend like fortified positions on the outskirts of Moscow as they keep trying to move north. But within the next several hours, I genuinely would not be surprised if news came out that Moscow was finally being besieged by Wagner forces. Now, of course, people are freaking the fuck out because we've never really, most of us, seen anything quite like this. We know, obviously, Russia is also a nuclear state. They have thousands upon thousands of nuclear weapons, and right now people are wondering, well, what if Wagner gets their hands on the launch codes, right? What if they get, you know, access to the nuclear weapons? What happens then? The truth of the matter is, and I don't want to fearmonger at all here when I say this, we really don't know. Now, I feel like a lot of people are misconstruing Wagner in this entire thing. Wagner is not some freedom fighting force. They are not heroes. They are not allies of the United States. They are not allies of the West. They are allies of Russia. They belong to Russia. They are Russian. They are brutal, careless killers. They have killed people in Ukraine without really, you know, any sort of second guess. And Prigozhin, the head of the entire group, the Wagner group here, is just as bloodthirsty and is just as cold and calloused, if not even more, than Putin was. It's essentially like swapping a dictator for a dictator if this guy, Prigozhin, ends up taking control. Now, part of the discourse now is what if, you know, Russia decides to move towards democracy or whatever. I think that's just speculation. But also at the same time this entire Russia situation is unfolding right now, there is another potential military coup unfolding in one of Russia's closest remaining allies in Belarus. Now, Belarus is another dictator-esque nation that is allied with Russia. It's north of Ukraine and west of Russia. And as it stands right now, watching everything that is happening inside of Russia, there are some military forces and some people inside of Belarus that are now openly calling on the military to take arms and stand against Lukashenko, who is the leader of Belarus, and to basically topple the regime in Belarus as well. So right now we are waiting until 5 p.m. local time or so before there is supposed to be an announcement from somebody within the Belarusian military. We do not know for sure with 100% clarity that there is a coup being staged inside of Belarus, but within the next 24 hours, if that hits the airwaves, I wouldn't be surprised either. Now, what does this mean for the Ukraine conflict? Obviously, that's what's on a lot of people's minds. Well, reports are suggesting that about 150,000 troops, Russian troops that is, are being taken from Ukraine and brought back to Russia to try and defend against the oncoming coup. Obviously, that would make sense if that were the case, right? They are going to need troops to defend. I mean, 25,000 troops, that is not the biggest military force on the planet, but it's not some small little joke either. I mean, 25,000 well-trained troops can cause a pretty big problem, especially in a country that is already fully enthralled in a war with its border neighbors. So, I mean, it's really not looking good for Putin and his allies in Russia and even Belarus right now. Now, of course, there's conspiracies going on, as many of you may have heard just a few days ago. the Pentagon announced that due to an accounting error of some sort, right, they accidentally lost like $6 billion that went to Ukraine. Oopsie daisy, we just lost a couple billion of your taxpayer dollars. Tee-hee, ooh-hoo, you know. But people now are speculating that the CIA might even be involved in this Russian military situation, suggesting that maybe the CIA has emboldened Prigozhin and allies in the area to stage uprisings against the government of Russia. Now, obviously, this is not confirmed, but I mean, given the CIA's history, right, would we all really be too surprised? Would this really be something that comes completely out of left field? I really don't think so. If it came out that the CIA toppled the Putin regime, I mean, first and foremost, I gotta say, and I'm not trying to make, you know, fun of a situation that's serious here, but that would quite literally be an all-time CIA performance. They would be putting up Wilt Chamberlain numbers if it turned out that they somehow successfully toppled a nuclear-armed regime. That would just be fucking, it'd be like watching Michael Jackson live in performance, right? Like, the CIA, they're known for their regime toppling. They're known for doing shit like this over the last several decades, but in nuclear-armed Russia, I mean, I don't know, that would be pretty fucking insane. So, right now, it's still a developing situation, but as it appears on paper here, I mean, the Russian military seems to not really be willing to engage the Wagner forces. Now, a small number of them have still, you know, seemed pretty loyal to Putin, but there's even reports now that as Wagner is marching north to Moscow, that some of the Russian army is laying their arms down and might even potentially be joining the Wagner column as they move north towards, well, what they assumed would be Putin, but is now basically an abandoned Moscow. So, Russian military presence in and around Moscow is still extremely high, so there will likely be some sort of conflict once they do reach Moscow, but as of right now, man, this is an unfolding situation, and it's pretty fucking insane. So, well, it's not often that something like this happens, but I do want to go ahead and give you guys this piece of information before we wrap this video up. As I am completing this video, quite literally as I'm completing this video, we now have breaking news. The chief of Wagner, Prigozhin, has reportedly said that to avoid any further bloodshed, they will be returning all Wagner convoys to military bases, which appears to be stopping the military movement towards Moscow. We don't know what exactly this means for this military coup that's unfolded in Russia. We don't know if they will continue to attempt to destabilize the government or try to take out the, you know, Putin regime and his boys any other way, but as of right now, we are getting finally some reports that maybe this will be cooling down at least temporarily here, where Wagner will be moving back to their military bases. So, doesn't mention anything about sending their men back to Ukraine, doesn't mention anything about a full-on stand down. It just appears that as of right now, in order to avoid like a full-scale civil war within Russia, they are somewhat kind of backing down. So just wanted to give you guys that update before we wrap this video up. Thank you all for watching. All right, bear with me again, folks. I'm here to update you guys again. It seems like every time like I stop recording this video and I send it to like be rendered and whatnot, there is a new update in this entire situation, as basically when I was wrapping up this video, it seems that the coup in Russia started to actually come to an end, and it's pretty much official now. We now have reports that Prigozhin and the Wagner troops did negotiate, and they have agreed to retreat to field camps in Ukraine and back to military bases and will no longer march to Moscow. They've decided to do this just hours outside of Moscow after negotiations, and apparently we now have reports that there are two major concessions by the Russian government, if you will, that has led to the end of this attempted military coup. So the first thing that has been given to Prigozhin and the Wagner group, or the Wagner group, I should say, in order to avoid them continuing their push forward, they were offered security guarantees in exchange for halting their advance. Basically meaning, you know, the Russians aren't going to kill Prigozhin, they're not going to round up the Wagner troops and kill them, or, you know, whatever. Basically just guaranteeing that, you know, they're not going to see any sort of revenge. Now, truth be told, I don't know if I would trust Putin on something like this. He is kind of a dictator war criminal, so I'm not really sure that I would, you know, be jumping for joy if he gave me a security guarantee. But also, there are now reports too, there will be a massive shakeup in the Russian Ministry of Defense leadership. This was one of Prigozhin and Wagner's major issues with the Kremlin was, as I stated earlier in the video, they had disagreed with some of the objectives in Ukraine, how some of the handling had been done. And we were basically now at this point where this was Wagner trying to destabilize / create change inside of the Ministry of Defense so that there would be what they deemed to be better leadership. And it appears that Putin and his allies in government have conceded on this point and will bring bring a massive shakeup to the leadership of Russia's Ministry of Defense in order for Wagner to not continue their advance towards Moscow. So as it stands right now, and keep in mind this is still a fluid situation, information still coming out pretty much minute by minute, but as it stands, the entire Russian coup has essentially ended inside of this YouTube video. So I started recording this video, it was still on, you know, they were hours outside of Moscow, we were looking at a potential clash in Moscow, right? As Putin and his allies had fled town. But as the recording of this video went on, the situation rapidly changed, and we are now looking at the end of this situation. Pretty insane stuff, but of course, you know, I wanted to keep you guys updated. I didn't want to have to make a follow-up video when I'm literally in the middle of recording this video now as this information's coming out. So I understand it's a little different pacing or whatever than I usually do in my videos, but I definitely wanted to update you guys with this information. So as it stands right now, the coup in Russia is officially over with. Wagner is standing down in exchange for security guarantees and Russian Ministry of Defense leadership changes. I just wanted to give you guys a full video of coverage considering the fact that I know not everyone got to see my stream last night, but it was more impromptu, a little unplanned, but I do appreciate everybody who tuned in not only to this video, but the stream last night. And as this situation continues to unfold, I will continue to keep you updated here on the channel. So if you're brand new around here, you've never watched before, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for updates in this situation. And with that being said, thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel. Follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shoptimus down below. Thank you to my Watch Optimus subscribers. Your support helps the channel tremendously. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, watching the Russian government collapse and signing out.